planet Virella 9 was a frozen world where the wind screamed like a living thing. The nights there were long, cruel, and so cold that even metal cracked in silence. Corporal Ethan Hale, a human soldier, sat alone inside a half-broken shelter. His breath came out in white clouds as he tried to stay close to a weak heater that barely worked. Around him everything was silent, too silent. His entire unit was gone. The outpost had fallen 3 days ago, and Ethan was the last one left alive. He stared at the dim light coming from the small heater. The sound of the wind outside reminded him that he was surrounded by endless ice and enemies. His body was tired, his uniform torn, and his rifle was running low on charge. Yet what hurt more than the wounds was the emptiness. He had fought beside his squad for years, and now there was no one left to talk to. Only memories. Outside, the storm raged like an angry beast. Ethan pulled his blanket tighter around himself, wishing he could shut out the world. But then a sound broke through the storm. It was not the wind. It was something heavier, slow steps crunching through snow. His hand went to his rifle immediately, his heart pounding. Someone or something was out there. He crouched near the door, every nerve ready to fire. The steps grew closer. Then a shadow appeared in the entrance. Tall, lean, covered in silver fur. For a moment, Ethan forgot to breathe. It was a Virellan, one of the alien wolf-like creatures that humans had been fighting for years. Her fur shimmered faintly under the moonlight, and her body was trembling. Before he could even aim, she stumbled forward and collapsed on the floor with a heavy thud. Ethan froze. His rifle trembled in his hands. He had seen Virellans tear apart armored soldiers. He had seen their claws rip through steel. Yet this one was different. She was injured, bleeding and shaking as if she had walked through a storm of knives. Her eyes, golden and bright even in pain, opened for a second and met his. Then she went still. He could shoot her. It would be easy. One pull of the trigger. But something stopped him. She wasn't attacking. She wasn't even awake enough to fight. She was dying. Ethan lowered his weapon slowly. "You're out of your mind, Hale," he whispered to himself. Helping an enemy, really? But his heart wouldn't let him walk away. He had lost too many lives already. He didn't want to watch another one fade in front of him, even if it belonged to an alien. He dragged her closer to the heater, his arms aching under her weight. Her body was cold, so cold that her fur felt stiff. Her breathing was shallow. Without thinking much, he took off his thermal blanket, the only thing keeping him warm, and wrapped it around her. The moment the warmth touched her skin, she made a faint, low sound. It was almost like a purr, a soft vibration from her chest. Ethan sat back watching her, unsure whether to feel fear or pity. "Don't die on me, wolf girl," he muttered. "I'm not built to survive alone." The storm outside howled for hours, but inside there was a strange peace. Ethan stared at her sleeping face. Her features looked wild, yet peaceful now. The lines of pain on her muzzle softened. For the first time since the attack, he didn't feel completely alone. He leaned against the wall, his eyelids heavy, but he kept the rifle close, just in case. Slowly, he drifted into half-sleep. Then a sound woke him, a low growl, deep and questioning. His eyes snapped open. She was awake, her golden eyes fixed on him, cautious and sharp. Her claws twitched beneath the blanket, and her ears flicked. He raised his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. "You're safe," he said quietly. "I didn't hurt you." She tilted her head, her nostrils flaring as she sniffed the air. Then she looked down at the blanket wrapped around her body. Her rough voice came out softly, broken but clear. You share warmth?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah. You needed it more than me." For a moment she just stared at him like she couldn't understand why a human would do that. Then slowly she curled tighter under the blanket and closed her eyes again. A faint rumbling sound came from her chest, something close to contentment. Ethan smiled faintly. "You're welcome," he whispered. Outside, the wind finally began to calm. Inside the tiny shelter, the last human and the wounded alien lay in silence, sharing warmth under a single blanket. And though Ethan didn't know it yet, that small act of kindness, the moment he shared his warmth, was the start of something far greater than either of their worlds could imagine. When Ethan opened his eyes, the storm had ended. The world outside the cracked window was white and silent. The sky above was pale blue, and the sunlight reflected off the snow, painting the room in soft light. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful. Almost. Then he remembered. The alien. He turned quickly. She was still there, lying on the ground beside the heater, wrapped tightly in his thermal blanket. Her fur looked cleaner now, the frost melted away. Her breathing was deeper, steady. The sight made Ethan feel something strange. Relief. He sat up slowly, careful not to make a sound. His rifle rested nearby, but he didn't reach for it. Instead, he just watched her. There was something oddly calm about her now. The night before, she had looked like a predator. This morning, she looked like a survivor. The blanket moved slightly. She was awake. Her eyes opened slowly, bright amber glowing in the dim light. For a few seconds, she didn't move. She just stared at him, curious, alert, cautious. Then with a soft growl, she sat up. The blanket slipped off her shoulders, and Ethan saw that her wounds were real. Deep cuts and plasma burns across her ribs and arms. He raised his hands gently. "Hey, easy. You're safe here." She blinked, tilting her head. Her ears twitched at his voice. "You, human soldier," she said in broken English. The words came slowly, as if she had to drag each one out. "Yeah," Ethan said quietly. "Corporal Ethan Hale, you?" She hesitated. Then softly, "Liara." Ethan nodded. "Liara, that's a nice name." She looked confused by the compliment but didn't reply. Her eyes dropped to the heater and then to the blanket that was half on her lap. She ran a claw gently over the fabric, almost like she was trying to understand it. "You give warmth," she said. "Why?" Ethan sighed. "Because you would have died without it." Liara's golden eyes narrowed slightly. "Enemy helps enemy, that is strange." He gave a tired smile. "Yeah, I guess I'm strange." For a moment, neither spoke. The heater made a soft hum between them. Liara's gaze drifted to the small pile of food rations beside him. She looked hungry, but she didn't ask. Ethan noticed anyway. He picked up a protein bar, tore it in half, and held it out. "Here, eat." She sniffed the air cautiously. "Human food?" "Yeah, not great, but it'll keep you alive." Slowly, she reached out, claws careful not to touch his skin. She sniffed the piece again before taking a small bite. Her face twisted in disgust, and Ethan couldn't help but laugh. "Tastes like plastic, right?" Liara looked at him strangely, then gave a soft huff that almost sounded like a laugh. "Plastic." Yes, that small exchange broke the silence between them. For the first time, the room didn't feel heavy with fear. Ethan leaned back, stretching his tired arms. Liara finished her piece quietly, licking the crumbs off her claws with neat precision. There was something graceful about her, wild but calm. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Why stay here? Your kind gone." Ethan looked down. The question hit deeper than she could know. "I couldn't leave," he said quietly. "My ship's destroyed, my people didn't make it." Liara's ears lowered slightly. "You alone," he nodded. "Yeah, guess so." A long silence filled the air. Then, to his surprise, Liara reached down and pulled the blanket closer around both of them. It brushed his leg lightly. Her fur was warm now, soft, she murmured. "Not alone now." Ethan froze for a moment, caught off guard by her words. Then slowly a smile tugged at his lips. "Yeah," he whispered. "Not alone." They sat like that for a while, sharing the quiet warmth. Outside, the frozen plains stretched endlessly. But inside that broken shelter, there was a small pocket of peace, something fragile but real. Liara's head tilted slightly as she looked at the blanket again. "This," she said, her voice thoughtful. "You call it what?" "A blanket," Ethan replied. "Keeps you warm." She nodded slowly, as if memorizing the word. Then her tail flicked once, and she looked at him with a small, proud smile. "Blanket is good. Our nest," Ethan blinked. "Nest?" "Yes," she said simply. "We share warmth." "It is nest." He let out a quiet chuckle. "Our nest, huh?" "That's one way to see it." Liara's golden eyes softened. "Warmth shared. Not yours. Ours." Something in those words melted the cold that had lived in Ethan's chest since the day his squad died. He didn't know what this strange bond meant or what would come next. But for the first time since the war began, he felt hope, small, flickering, but real. He looked at her and said quietly, "Then I guess this is our nest." Outside, the sunlight grew brighter, touching the snow with a golden glow. Inside, two former enemies sat together beneath a shared blanket, and without saying it, both understood. They were no longer enemies. They were survivors and maybe something more. The next few days on Varela 9 were hard. The storm had passed, but the cold still ruled everything. The air bit into the skin and food was running out. The heater was weak, the power cells fading. Ethan and Liara needed to move or they would both freeze before the next night. Ethan checked his scanner. "Power's at 20%, he said. "We can't stay here much longer." Liara sat near the heater, her sharp eyes watching him. Her wounds had started to heal, but scars still lined her fur. "Where will you go?" she asked softly. "North," he said, pointing at the map screen. "There's a supply beacon about 5 kilometers away. If it's still working, it might have food or batteries." Liara tilted her head. "Dangerous. Storms, predators, machines." Ethan smiled faintly. "You sound like my sergeant." "I sound like one who wants to live," she said, standing up. Her movement was smoother now, but Ethan could tell she still felt pain. He hesitated. "You sure you can walk that far?" She looked at him, almost offended. "I fought human tanks," she said, her voice proud. "I can walk," Ethan laughed quietly. "All right, wolf girl. Let's move." The cold outside hit them like knives. Snow crunched beneath their boots and claws as they pushed forward through the open plains. The wind whispered across the ice fields, and every sound felt louder in the silence of the frozen world. Liara moved ahead, her senses sharper than any scanner. She stopped suddenly and sniffed the air. "Something hunts," she said. Ethan tensed. "Hostiles?" She shook her head. "No machines, beast." Before he could respond, a deep growl echoed from the distance, a monstrous sound full of hunger. From behind a ridge, a Christabeast appeared. It was massive, built like a bear but covered in glowing ice shards that shimmered with light. Its eyes locked on them. Ethan raised his rifle. Of course. Couldn't be easy. Liara stepped in front of him, her claws sliding out. "You shoot." "I strike." "Wait, what?" But she was already moving. She sprinted toward the creature, snow flying behind her. Her movements were fast, almost a blur. The beast roared and swung its icy claws, but Liara ducked under it with a snarl. Ethan took aim and fired, the plasma bolt hitting the creature's leg. Steam burst out as the ice cracked. The fight was quick and brutal. Liara leaped onto its back, digging her claws deep into the creature's neck. With one last blast from Ethan's rifle, the Christabeast fell, shaking the ground as it collapsed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Liara stood on the fallen creature, breathing heavily, her fur glowing under the blue light. She turned to look at Ethan with a small grin. "You shoot well, human. And you fight like a storm," Ethan replied, smiling back. She bent down and touched the dead creature's hide. "Meat," she said simply. "Warmth," Ethan blinked. "You want to eat that?" Liara gave him a serious look. "You want to starve?" he sighed. "Fair point." They made a small camp near a cliff using metal scraps for shelter. Liara showed him how to light a small plasma spark to cook the Christabeast's meat. The smell wasn't pleasant, but it was food. They sat close, sharing pieces in silence. Ethan chewed slowly. "Never thought I'd share dinner with a Viralan." Liara tilted her head, curious. "You humans always think we are monsters." "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's what they told us. But I think we just never tried to understand each other." She looked at him for a long moment. "We were told humans were cold, empty hearts, but—" She paused, her golden eyes softening. "You shared warmth." Ethan smiled faintly. "Guess we both got lied to." The wind howled above them, but their small fire glowed bright. Liara lay her tail across her legs, then pulled the shared blanket over both of them again. It was worn and torn, but it still held warmth. She looked up at him. "You hunt beside me. You share food. You share warmth. That means we are pack." Ethan blinked. "Pack?" "Yes," she said with a small nod. "Two survive better than one." Her words were simple, but they touched something deep inside him. For so long he had been fighting, running, surviving alone. Now for the first time something called him part of a pack. He looked into her glowing eyes and said softly, "Then I guess I'm part of your pack, Liara." She smiled, a real one this time, showing her sharp teeth but no threat behind them. "Not mine," she said, her voice gentle. "Ours." Ethan chuckled quietly, pulling the blanket closer around them as the wind outside grew colder again. "Our nest, our pack." "Got it." Liara's head rested lightly against his shoulder as the fire dimmed. In that frozen world surrounded by death and ice, two survivors found something stronger than fear: trust. And though neither said it aloud, both felt the same quiet thought in their hearts. Maybe warmth was not just heat. Maybe it was the beginning of belonging. The next morning came quietly. The sky above Varela 9 was pale gray, and thin snowflakes drifted down like falling ash. Ethan woke first. The fire had burned out during the night and his breath fogged the air. Beside him, Liara still slept, curled under the blanket like a silver shadow. Her breathing was soft and steady. For a moment, Ethan just watched her, a strange calm in his chest. He had forgotten what it felt like to wake up and not be alone. He stepped outside their small camp and looked at the white horizon. Everything seemed endless, an ocean of frozen silence. But as he turned on his scanner, a faint signal blinked on the screen. It was weak, distant, but real, a human distress beacon. His heart skipped. "No way," he whispered. He tapped the screen again, same result. The signal was coming from 2 kilometers east. That meant there were humans nearby, maybe survivors, maybe even a rescue team. He ran back inside. "Liara, get up." "There's a signal." She opened one golden eye, half asleep. "Signal?" "Yes. A human beacon. Someone might still be out there." Liara sat up slowly, the blanket slipping off her shoulders. Her expression was unreadable. "You want to go?" Ethan nodded. "Of course. It could be my people." She looked away for a moment, silent. Then she asked softly, "And if they see me?" Ethan froze. He hadn't thought about that. The war between humans and Virelans wasn't over. To his commanders, she was still the enemy, a living weapon. I'll explain," he said, though his voice sounded unsure. "I'll tell them you helped me." Liara's eyes met his. "Your kind kills mine on sight." Her words hit like cold wind. He couldn't deny it. He wanted to believe they would listen, but deep down he knew they wouldn't. To the human military, compassion didn't matter. Orders did. Still, he couldn't abandon the beacon. It might be the only way off this frozen world. He looked at her, guilt heavy in his chest. "I have to go," he said quietly. Liara stood, her tail swaying slightly. "Then I go too." Ethan frowned. "It's not safe for you." "If they see you," she interrupted firmly. "You share warmth. You share food. You are pack. I do not let pack walk into danger alone." Her voice was steady, but her eyes told a deeper truth. She was afraid not of humans, but of being left behind. Ethan hesitated, then finally nodded. "All right, we go together." The walk was long and silent. The snow came down heavier as they crossed the plains. The beacon signal grew stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat on his scanner. Ethan's hope rose with every step, but Liara grew more tense. Her ears flicked at every distant sound, her claws slightly unsheathed. After an hour, they reached a ridge overlooking a half-buried crash site. A small human drone beacon blinked weakly in the snow beside a broken transport pod. No people, no life. Ethan climbed down and brushed off the ice around the beacon. It was damaged, but still transmitting. He activated the message log, and a voice crackled through the static. "This is Lieutenant Marin of the 9th Recon. Survivors detected near Sector 9-7. Drone units dispatched for cleanup. Any human signal will be prioritized for extraction. All Virelan entities to be terminated." Ethan's face went pale. "Cleanup?" He looked at Liara, who stood behind him, silent as the snow. "They're sending drones. To kill everything not human." Liara said nothing for a long moment. Then quietly, "Your kind comes to save you." "And to kill me?" He clenched his fists. "No, I won't let that happen." She shook her head. "You cannot fight your own machines." Ethan looked around. The air already hummed faintly with the sound of approaching engines. The rescue drones were near. His heart raced. He could already see them in the distance. 3 small flying machines scanning the ice with red lights. He grabbed Liara's hand. "Come on, we need to hide." They ran toward the rocks nearby, snow flying under their boots and claws. The drones passed overhead, beams sweeping across the ground. One light came dangerously close, brushing the edge of Liara's tail. They crouched behind the rocks, hearts pounding. Ethan's breath came fast. "They'll keep searching," he whispered. "They won't stop until they find us." Liara looked at him, calm even in fear. "They search for you. They save you. You should go." He shook his head. "Not without you," her voice softened. "Ethan, you gave me warmth. You made me part of a nest. That is more than my own people gave me. But if you stay, you die." He looked at her, eyes wet with emotion. "Then we die together." Liara stared at him for a long, quiet moment. Then she reached out, touching his chest gently with her clawed hand. "Humans," she whispered, "so strange, so full of heart." The sound of engines grew louder, echoing through the frozen valley. Ethan gripped his rifle, torn between duty and something far stronger. In that moment, surrounded by snow and danger, he realized something. The war didn't matter anymore. The sides, the orders, the flags, they were all meaningless compared to the person standing beside him. Liara met his eyes and said softly, "Our nest is not place." "It is us." Ethan swallowed hard, his heart heavy. "Then let's keep it safe." They turned to face the storm of red lights coming their way side by side, a soldier and an alien, ready to fight not as enemies, but as one. The air was sharp with tension. Snow blew in waves across the frozen plains, and the red lights of the approaching drones painted the white world with streaks of danger. Ethan crouched behind a pile of shattered rocks, rifle ready. Beside him, Liara knelt low, her golden eyes glowing in the gloom. "They found us," Ethan whispered. Liara sniffed the air. "4 machines." Flying low. "They follow your heat trail." Ethan cursed under his breath. "They'll see us any minute." Liara turned her head toward him. "We can run. The mountains are near." He looked at the horizon, jagged cliffs only a few kilometers away. "They might make it." But the drones were faster. "They'll shoot us down before we reach them," he said. Liara's ears flattened. "Then we fight." Ethan looked at her, at the determination in her eyes. She was injured, exhausted, and still she stood tall. He felt something twist inside his chest, fear, pride, and something deeper he didn't want to name. "All right," he said quietly. "We fight." The first drone appeared through the snow, its metallic body humming, red eye scanning the ground. Ethan took aim. One clean shot from his rifle cut through the air, hitting the drone's side. It exploded in a burst of sparks and smoke. The second and third came fast, their plasma guns firing bright blue bolts. Ethan dove behind a rock as the ground erupted beside him. Liara leaped out with a snarl, moving faster than his eyes could follow. Her claws slashed through one drone's sensor core, ripping it apart midair. The explosion sent her tumbling into the snow, but she landed on her feet, panting hard. "Two down," Ethan shouted. The last drone circled above them, smarter than the others. It fired a barrage of plasma rounds. One blast grazed Ethan's arm, burning his sleeve. He bit back a cry, gripping his rifle tighter. Liara growled, eyes wide with anger. She sprinted forward again, but this drone dodged, rising higher. Ethan took a deep breath, steadied his hands, and aimed at its weak point. The rifle hummed, then fired a bright streak of light. The shot hit dead center. The drone burst into flame and crashed into the snow. Silence followed. The wind whispered again, and the world seemed to breathe. Ethan lowered his rifle, heart still racing. Liara stood nearby, chest heaving, smoke rising from her fur where a plasma shot had grazed her side. He rushed to her. "You're hit!" She shook her head. "Just burn. I've had worse." He tore a strip from his sleeve and pressed it against the wound anyway. "Hold still," he said. "You've done enough fighting for one day." Her lips curled slightly. "You command like Alpha," he smiled weakly, "and you bite like one." They shared a quiet laugh, soft and short, but it was real. Around them, the snow began to fall again, slowly covering the broken machines. It was almost peaceful, but Ethan's scanner beeped again. His face paled. "More are coming." Liara's ears twitched. "How many?" "Too many." He looked at her. She was still bleeding, her fur damp with snow and smoke. She couldn't fight another wave. He knew it. She knew it too. Her eyes met his, calm and sad. "You should go. They will not stop." "I'm not leaving you." "You must," she said softly. "You are human. They will save you. And kill you." Liara placed her clawed hand on his chest. "You gave me warmth. You gave me hope. That is enough." Ethan's throat tightened. "No," he said fiercely. "You're not dying here. Not like this," but she only smiled, soft, tired, beautiful. Humans always fight for something. Or someone. Her gaze lifted toward the rising hum of the next wave of drones. "Now go. Keep the nest safe." She pushed him back toward the rocks. Before he could stop her, she ran out into the open snow, her fur flashing silver under the cold light. The drones spotted her instantly and changed direction. Plasma fire lit the sky as she charged at them, roaring, claws slicing through the air. Ethan screamed her name, but the storm swallowed his voice. The battle lasted only a minute. Then there was silence again. Smoke drifted across the plain, glowing faintly under the red sky. He stumbled forward, searching. "Liara, Liara!" At last he found her lying in the snow, surrounded by the wreckage of 2 more drones. Her body was still, fur scorched and bleeding. The blanket, their blanket, was clutched in her claws, half burned. Ethan fell to his knees beside her. No, no, please, her eyes fluttered open. Ethan, she whispered, I'm here. You're okay, did we…
Keep it safe?
She asked weakly. He nodded, tears freezing on his cheeks. Yeah, you did. You saved me. Her lips curved into a faint smile. Good, then our nest is safe. Her breathing slowed. Warmth is still here, she whispered, her hand touching his chest one last time. Then her eyes closed, her body going still under the falling snow. Ethan bowed his head, holding her close as the wind carried her final warmth away. Around them, the drones were gone, but the sky was heavy and cold. He wrapped the burned blanket around her and whispered, Our nest is safe, Liara. Always. The storm began again, but this time, he didn't feel the cold. He only felt the echo of her warmth, faint, but still there. Snow kept falling long after the battle ended. Ethan sat beside Liara's still body, his hands trembling. The world was quiet now, except for the soft whisper of wind and the distant crackle of dying flames. The sky above was gray and endless, a frozen silence that pressed against his heart. He couldn't move. He couldn't think. He could only stare at her face, the golden fur now dusted with snow, her lips curved in that faint, peaceful smile. It looked like she was only sleeping, like she might wake up at any moment and growl at him for crying. Come on, Liara, he whispered. You said we'd find the mountains together. You promised. But there was no answer. Only the soft sound of snow landing on the burned blanket that covered her chest. He reached out and brushed a few flakes away, his fingers shaking. Her fur was cold. Ethan pressed the side of his head against her and closed his eyes. Memories flooded back. Her sharp laugh, her confused wonder at human words. The way she called their blanket our nest. It had all felt strange once, but now it was everything. He remembered how she'd shared her warmth with him that first night, and how he had promised to keep her safe. He had failed. The radio on his wrist beeped again, loud and mechanical. Unit 7, respond. This is Command Base Delta, do you copy? Ethan swallowed hard, staring at the blinking green light. He almost ignored it. But then he pressed the button. His voice cracked. This is Sergeant Ethan Ward. Sergeant Ward, the voice replied. We lost your signal 2 days ago. Status? He looked down at Liara's body. His throat tightened. Mission failed, he said softly. Target not hostile. Repeat, target was not hostile. Repeat, Sergeant? The voice asked, sharp and confused. You said target was hostile? He clenched his jaw. No, he said. She saved me. Again and again. She fought your drones to protect me. Static filled the air. Sergeant, that's impossible. Alien bioforms are classified as monsters, Ethan said bitterly. But you never met her. You never saw her smile. She wasn't a monster. She was more human than most of us. Sergeant Ward, the command voice said coldly. Stand by for retrieval. Do not engage further, and dispose of the alien remains as per protocol. Ethan froze. His fingers tightened around the radio until it cracked. Say that again, he said, voice low and trembling. Dispose of the remains. That's an order. For a long time he said nothing. Then very quietly he whispered, No. Repeat, Sergeant. I said no, he shouted, his voice breaking. You don't get to erase her. She wasn't just something. She was someone. Static hissed again. Sergeant Ward, you are in violation of… He ripped the radio off his wrist and threw it into the snow. It landed with a small thud and went silent. He stood up, looking down at Liara. The snow had already started to cover her face again. Gently, he knelt and pulled the half-burned blanket tighter around her shoulders. He whispered, They'll never understand you, Liara, but I will. He began digging a small grave in the snow, beside the rocks where they had built their last fire. His hands burned from the cold, his nails cracked, but he didn't stop. He worked until his fingers bled, until the ground was soft enough to hold her. When it was done, he lifted her carefully. She was heavy now, her body still and lifeless, but he carried her like she was made of light. He laid her down gently and covered her with the blanket, the same one they had shared on that first night. When the last bit of snow covered her face, he whispered, Rest, Liara. The nest is yours now. Hours passed before he finally stood again. The storm had calmed. The sun peeked weakly through the clouds, painting the sky in pale gold. Ethan's breath came out in white mist. His body ached, but his heart was heavier than any pain. Then he saw it. Her necklace, the one made of tiny metal pieces she had scavenged. It hung from his belt where she had tied it days ago. Slowly, he took it off and looked at it shining in the weak sunlight. He pressed the necklace to his chest. "You called me Pack," he whispered. "Now I'll make sure the whole galaxy knows your name." He turned toward the horizon, the mountains rising in the distance like silent giants. He picked up his rifle, slung it over his back, and began walking. Every step felt like fire and ice, but he didn't stop. As he walked, he spoke softly to the wind. "You weren't a monster, Liara. You were home." Behind him, snow fell gently over the small mound of white, the place where their story ended, and his new mission began. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't return to his base. Not after this. Not after her. Somewhere deep in the wind, he thought he heard a voice, soft, warm, familiar. "Keep the nest safe." He smiled faintly through his tears. "I will," he whispered. "I promise." Weeks passed. The snowstorm ended, and the land began to thaw under the pale light of a distant sun. But for Ethan, time felt frozen. Each morning, he woke in the cave they had once shared, half expecting Liara's voice to call him awake. Each night he spread what was left of their burned blanket over himself. Though it was torn, he could still smell her there, faint and warm. He spoke to her sometimes quietly. "You'd laugh if you saw me now," he said one night, staring at the small fire. "Cooking those stupid ration packs wrong again," he almost heard her reply in the wind. "You always burn them, human." It made him smile through the ache. But deep inside, he knew he couldn't stay. The humans would come soon, and if they found her grave, they would destroy it. They would erase her story just like Command had ordered. He couldn't let that happen. He had made her a promise. The nest had to stay safe. So one morning he packed what little he had left, his rifle, a few tools, and her necklace tied around his wrist, and began walking toward the mountains. Liara had always said her people lived beyond them once before the war wiped them out. He didn't know if any had survived, but if they had, he would find them. He would tell them about her. About the alien who protected a human soldier. About the one who called a blanket a nest. About how she loved, fought, and gave her life for someone not of her kind. Days turned into weeks as he crossed the frozen peaks. His body grew weaker, his beard longer, his hands scarred from cold and rock. But he never stopped. At night, he would look up at the stars and whisper, "Still keeping it safe, Liara." One night after a long climb, he reached the top of a ridge. Below him stretched a valley of silver light, strange towers half buried in snow, flickering with faint blue energy. His heart raced. He found it, her people's ruins. He descended slowly, carefully. The ancient structures hummed as if still breathing. Inside one building, lights flickered on as he entered. Then a soft, mechanical voice spoke in Liara's language. He didn't understand the words, but he recognized the tone. It sounded like a memory, an echo. Curious, he followed it deeper inside until he found a small crystal device glowing faintly on a pedestal. When he touched it, the room came alive with light, and there she was. A hologram of Liara stood before him, smiling. Her voice was clear, calm, and warm. "If you are hearing this," she said, "then one of my kind has returned. Or someone who remembers." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "I remember," he whispered. "It's me, Liara. I kept it safe." The hologram continued, unaware. "We were hunters once, but the war changed us. We became feared, hated, yet I believed there was still goodness among the stars. If you find this, protect it. Protect what we were." Tears filled his eyes. He reached toward the light, his fingers trembling. "You were right, Liara," he said softly. "There is good out there. You proved it." He looked around the chamber and saw more crystals, hundreds of them glowing faintly. They held her people's history, their songs, their hopes, and now, because of her, he had found them. Ethan set his pack down and began connecting his communicator to the crystals. He recorded everything, the stories, the symbols, the voices. When he finished, he looked at her hologram again. "I'll take your story to the stars," he said. "They'll know you lived. They'll know what you did." He took one last look at the glowing image, and they'll know that a human shared a nest with a wolf from another world, and found something worth fighting for. Years later, long after the frozen planet had been abandoned, a story began to spread among human colonies. A story told by soldiers, travelers, and explorers who never met him, but heard the tale from those who did. They called him the human who howled at the stars. They said he roamed the frontier worlds, carrying a half-burned blanket and a necklace made of alien steel. That wherever he went, he left behind the same message carved into rock or metal. Here lies Liara of the Morath. She taught a human how to love beyond fear. Our nest is eternal. Some said he disappeared into the unknown, walking beneath alien moons searching for her kind. Others said he joined the stars themselves, howling her name into the endless dark. But one thing was certain. Her story lived. And through it, humanity learned something new. That sometimes the bravest thing a human can do isn't to fight an alien, but to love one. End of story.